This is Masechet Pesachim, Daf Kuf Chaf Amud Aleph, and we begin in the middle of the Daf with a Gemara that, although it's on the second to last page of the Masechet, is clearly very fundamental to Pesach. Amar Rava. Rava said, Matza bizman hazeh d'oraisa, Maror d'Rabbanan. That matzah nowadays, post temple times, after the Chorban Beis Hamikdash, matzah is still d'oraisa, is still a biblical obligation, while maror is only rabbinic, is not mitzvah d'oraisa anymore. Umayishno maror d'chsiv al matzah marorim. How are they different? Maror, it is said that it should be eaten with the Korban Pesach. Bizman de'ika Pesach yesh maror, bizman de'leka Pesach leka maror. The pasuk implies that with Pesach we eat maror. Without the Korban Pesach, there's no maror, because the Korban Pesach is to be eaten al matzos umarorim. Matzah nami haksiv al matzos umarorim. Matzah is the same pasuk, that the Korban Pesach should be eaten with the matzah. So the Gemara answers, matzah mehader hader bekra. The pasuk returns to the maror in a different place in the Torah and says, ba'erev tochlu matzos. So there's a separate pasuk, a separate mitzvah to eat matzah, which is not linked in particular to the Korban Pesach. In Sefer Bamidbar, when we're speaking about Pesach Sheni, the Torah says, al matzos u'merorim yochluhu, and in Shmos, in Parakid Bet, the pasuk says, "Barishon ba'arba'a soyom lachodesh ba'erev tochlu matzos." Ba'erev tochlu matzos, independent of the mitzvah of Korban Pesach. That's the view of Rava. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar echad zeh v'echad zeh d'Rabbanan. Rav Acha says that both matzah and maror are d'Rabbanan nowadays. Ela haksiv ba'erev tochlu matzos, and even though the pasuk says that there's a mitzvah to eat matzah which is not linked to Korban Pesach, hahimi bayalei letamei v'shahaya b'derech rechoka. That's speaking about a very particular situation. Someone living during the times of the Beis Hamikdash, when Korban Pesach is in effect, but this person is unable to bring a Korban Pesach. Desalka datcha amina. Kevan to Pesach lo achli matzah umaror nami no l'neichol. You might think that someone who's tummy, who's impure, or who finds himself at a physical distance from the Beis Hamikdash, you might think since he can't eat the Korban Pesach, he shouldn't eat the matzah and the maror also. So kamash shmulon, that nevertheless, even though he has no Korban Pesach, since he's still living at the time of the Korban Pesach, and the Jewish people as a nation are bringing the Korban Pesach, he can still partake of the matzah and have an obligation of matzah, but maror he would not have. So Rav Acha says that nowadays, when there's no Korban Pesach at all, then there's no mitzvah of matzah or maror d'oraisa, and it's only midrabanan that the Chachamim instituted it for us to remember the times of the Beis Hamikdash. And the only time that there's a mitzvah of matzah independent of the Korban Pesach is only someone living during the times of the Beis Hamikdash who's unable to bring a Korban Pesach. Rava Amar Lecha Tamei v'shahaya b'derech rechoka lo tzarich kra. Rava disagrees. He says this pasuk isn't necessary to teach us the law of Tamei v'derech rechoka. Delo geriye me arel ben nechar, because we can derive their law from the law of an arel and a ben nechar. An arel is someone who's uncircumcised, who can't bring a Korban Pesach, and a ben nechar is not the subject of this Gemara per se, but is someone who doesn't believe in God and can't partake in the Korban Pesach. Titania kol arel lo yochal bo, that an arel can't eat the Korban Pesach. Bo, the word bo is to emphasize bo eino ochel, aval ochel b'matzah v'maror. That this pasuk, the word bo, teaches us that an arel does eat matzah and maror. So we can extrapolate from the fact that an arel can't eat Korban Pesach, but still can eat the matzah and the maror. The same thing should be true about tamei u'b'derech rechoka. So therefore, Rava says that the independent pasuk of ba'erev tochlu matzos refers to nowadays. V'idach, and the other view of Acha bar Yaakov says ksiv b'hai, uksiv b'hai, utriche. There's a source for arov and nechar, and there's a source for tamei v'derech choka. And they're both necessary because they're both different. You might think that the tamei, that one can eat while the other can't, and vice versa, because the tamei u'b'derech choka is someone who's conceptually able to bring the Korban Pesach, but just can't do it right now. On the other hand, he's going to have his chance to eat the Korban Pesach with the Matza and the Maror after, on Pesach Sheni. So perhaps he wouldn't need it on Pesach Rishon. Tanya Kavase to Rava. The Gemara brings support to Rava from a Brisa. And the Brisa learns from Psukim to teach us basically the same view that Rava said. Sheishes yamim tochal matzos u'biyom hashvi yatzeres la'Hashem Elokecha. The pasuk says that 6 days you eat matzah, and the second day is a Yom Tov. 7th day is the last day of Pesach. Ma shvi'i rishus av sheishes yamim rishus. Just like the 7th day is still part of Pesach, so apparently there's no obligation of matzah because it's only 6 days. So too, all of the days are an option. My timer, how do we know this? Havidavar shahaya b'chlal v'yatsa min ha'klal alamed. It's the principle, one of Rabbi Shmuel's principles, that something which is included in a klal and was excluded lo lalamed al atzmo yatsa ela lalamed al klal kulo yatsa. That when something is excluded from a general principle or a general phrase in the pasuk, it sheds light on the entire klal. As Rashi says, this refers to the fact that Shivas Yamim Tochal Matzos. We first had Shivas Yamim Tochal Matzos, and then this pasuk of Sheishes Yamim comes to exclude the 7th day to say that there's no obligation, and that is not to teach us about only the 7th day, but about all the days that they're all optional. That there's a mitzvah to eat matzah on all the days, but it's not obligatory. Just like the 7th day is not obligatory, so too all of the other days. Yachol aflayla harishon rishus. You might think the first night is also optional. Talmud lomar al matzos u'merorim yachluhu. This pasuk tells us al matzos u'merorim yachluhu that even though it's optional to eat matzah all the days of Pesach, the first night it's an obligation. You might think this is only true if the Beis HaMikdash is existing. How do we know that this is true even without a Beis HaMikdash? Talmud lomar ba'erev tochlu matzos. Hakasuv kiva'u chova. This pasuk ba'erev tochlu matzos teaches us that it's an obligation for all time. The particular chiddush of this pasuk of ba'erev tochlu matzos is specifically for the time of no Beis HaMikdash, when there's still an obligation to eat matzah. And this supports Rava's view that matzah nowadays is d'oraisa, and it's only maror, which is midrabanan. And this is, since this brisa supports Rava, this is how we paskin that matzah nowadays is d'oraisa and maror is d'rabanan.